You are listening to 106.7, Wilmington's Big Talker, and my name is Paul Vallone. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m. as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of volunteers from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. Today, we will bring you up to speed on important gun rights news. We will discuss the current trend in the gun control movement from a historical perspective. What is similar, for example, to 1968 and 1994, and what is dramatically different. And finally, we will discuss the implications of legislation to designate some as domestic terrorists, which, considering a recent designation of the NRA as a domestic terrorist organization by the San Francisco City Council, is a definition which could easily include you. And with Congress returning this week to consider gun control, grab your pen, because in the last segment, we're going to tell you which legislators you need to contact ASAP. But first, it's getting ugly out there, folks. The full frontal attack from the leftists is on, and by all appearances, it's headed toward violence. Hollywood leftists are busy blacklisting anybody who donates to Donald Trump. Those who dare disagree on social media are getting doxxed by the left. Lately, even wearing a red sports team's hat is now under attack because, after all, they look so much like MAGA hats, and the leftist snowflakes are being triggered. And of course, Antifa is busily beating up conservatives with the audacity who have the audacity to oppose them. Similarly, GRNC's Facebook page is filling up with hate messages from leftists. Presumably because of the Facebook ad campaign that our Political Action Committee, the GRNC Political Victory Fund, is running for Dan Bishop in the 9th Congressional Special Election, we're even getting trolls from San Francisco. Yes, San Francisco, posting bitter messages of hate. That, by the way, would be the gorgeously progressive, I got to make sure I get that right, gorgeously progressive city of San Francisco, as one leftist described it. And never mind the human feces from the homeless encampments in the streets. One particularly nasty leftist, I'm sorry, I think that phrase is redundant, even added a lovely link to the declaration by the San Francisco City Council that the NRA, and by association you, are domestic terrorists. Last week, I got a text message from GRNC's office director with a picture of a letter sent to our office, anonymously of course, and addressed to me. It said, "Hi Paul, can you feel it? Can you feel the tide turning? Are you scared?" Well, so tell me, who's scared? Me, who puts my name on everything I put out, or the guy afraid to sign the letter to our office? Oh yes, and now if you're an NRA member, you might be labeled a domestic terrorist, but we'll talk about that more later. But of course, the leftists are not entirely wrong. As we will discuss later, the tide may be turning, albeit primarily among the hard left, and as we will discuss later, they do indeed want to end private gun ownership in America. And when exchanging messages with one of the San Francisco leftists, I was indeed a little scared. I was scared that something I said might be used to issue some sort of California red flag gun confiscation order against me and thereby deprive me of my Second Amendment rights. And that, of course, is the goal of the leftists. Fear, to cow you into silence and submission. That, as one Oregon conservative activist recently discovered, is the goal of red flag gun confiscation laws. Open your mouth and lose your guns. That is the goal of branding your every utterance as racist. That is the goal of doxing people who dare to speak their minds. You see, folks, as I have said many times and will say again, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, we are in a cultural cage match for the future of American society. And in that cultural cage match, there is, to quote renowned pistolero Bill Jordan, there is no second place winner. One of the leftists spewing hate on our page calls herself Amy. Well, I guess that's Amy with an I, since apparently leftists no longer know how to spell, or maybe it's a cute variation of the French word ami, or friend. Although I should note here that if it is in fact a variation of ami, the left got it wrong again, because ami, as it refers to a female, should be spelled A-M-I-E. But never mind. To quote Dennis Miller, I don't want to get off on a rant here, but what is it with leftists and the names they give their children? Not long ago, a Southwest Airlines customer service agent got national recognition for not knowing how to pronounce the customer's child's name, which was Absadi. That's spelled A-B-C-D-E. Only for the left could the naming of one's child become an exercise in cultural one-upmanship. But I digress. Amy or Ami or whatever the hell you call yourself, I told you you would be featured in my show, and I'm a man of my word. But that cowed into silence thing, that ain't gonna happen. But the number of leftist trolls that have shown up on GRNC's Facebook page as the result of our ads for Dan Bishop in the 9th Congressional, they tell me one thing. The left is pissed off and therefore highly motivated. If you do not get similarly pissed off at their attempt to hijack not only your culture but your values, we will lose in the 2020 election. And then all bets are off. Speaking of elections, if you live in the 3rd Congressional District, and especially if you live in the 9th Congressional District, you need to get out and vote this Tuesday, if you have not done so already. Even if you don't live in these districts, you need to call people you know who do live in the districts and tell them to vote, at least simpatico people. The 3rd District is Eastern North Carolina. In the 3rd, effective voting rights for gun voters is pretty straightforward, and the GRNC Political Victory Fund recommends you vote Greg Murphy for Congress. That's Greg Murphy for Congress. But the tough race is the 9th. The 9th is a long, winding district, and Charlotte is only part of it. It actually winds eastward through the state, encompassing even Lumberton and part of Fayetteville. You may recall this is a do-over for Democrats who lost the original 2018 election, claimed voter fraud, and were eventually awarded a revote. The original winner, Republican Mark Harris, elected not to run again. So the race is now between Republican State Senator Dan Bishop and the loser of the original race, Democrat Dan McCready. Bishop has a good 94% pro-gun voting record during his tenure in the North Carolina Senate. McCready, on the other hand, makes the usual claim of Democrats that he supports the Second Amendment, but, it always has a but, McCready has recently come out of the closet on gun control, supporting universal gun registration and restrictions to gun shows. Worse, in a recent debate, he characterized people who buy guns at gun shows as, and I quote, white nationalists. White nationalists. I love it. If elected, you can count on McCready to support whatever gun ban comes down the pipeline. Moreover, millions of dollars in left-wing money is flowing into the state from out-of-state leftists trying to make the 9th Congressional Special Election a bellwether for the 2020 elections. Your last chance to vote is this Tuesday, September 10th. If you live in the 9th, vote gun rights by voting Dan Bishop for Congress. That's Dan Bishop for Congress. If you don't live in the 9th, call your friends and family who do and tell them to vote on Tuesday. Right now, we are going to take a short break, after which we will return with a discussion of the current push by the left for citizen disarmament, and specifically how it is similar to and different from trends toward gun control in the 1960s, again in the 1990s. But while we're on break, grab a pen because you're going to have a couple of phone calls to make, particularly with respect to some NASCAR, for example. We'll talk more about that shortly. Right now, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. After our break, we will return with still more information better enabling you to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. In gun rights news, this just in. Starting with international news, Fox News reports that in a horrific crime in China, a man has killed 8 school children on the opening day of school. Says Fox, quote, a man who recently served time for attempted murder allegedly killed 8 children and injured 2 others who were attending their first day of school in China, police said. The 40-year-old man, only identified by the surname Yu, was taken into custody late Monday after he allegedly attacked the kids at an elementary school in, pardon my pronunciation here, but I failed Chinese in school, something which will undoubtedly hinder me when the Chinese take over the world. But anyways, in Chaiyangpo village in Enshi city in Hubei province. It was not immediately clear how the children were attacked. The man was released from Hubei prison last June after serving a sentence for attempted murder, according to local media. A possible motive was not immediately clear. Now, nor is this the first time for China, we should note, and I'm willing to bet the instrument was probably a knife, since that seems to be the weapon of choice in China, where guns are banned. In January, 20 children were injured after a man attacked them inside an elementary school in Beijing. In June 2018, 2 children were stabbed to death by a man outside an elementary school in Shanghai. In April of last year, 9 were killed and more than a dozen injured outside a middle school in northwestern Shaanxi province by an attacker who allegedly was a former pupil seeking revenge for having been bullied. But of course, this must be fake news, since we all know private gun ownership is forbidden in China upon penalty of death, so obviously mass killings cannot occur there. After all, if you ask the gun ban advocates and the ostensibly mainstream media, mass murders occur only in the gun-loving United States, right? Elsewhere internationally, Yahoo News reports that the Kiwis are not entirely happy with their new ban on semi-automatic firearms, which followed the massacre in Christchurch, New Zealand. Says Yahoo, quote, some New Zealand gun owners are upset that they're being compelled to hand over their assault weapons for money. You think? But here's the interesting part, and I quote, so far, owners have turned in more than 15,000 newly banned guns as well as 64,000 parts and accessories. In return, the government has handed them 32 million New Zealand dollars, about 20 million US, but nobody has a clear target for the program because authorities haven't kept track of the number of guns in the country. Tentative estimates put the total number of guns in New Zealand at about 1.5 million, and the number of weapons that are now banned at about 175,000. If those numbers are correct, it would mean less than 10% of the banned weapons have been handed in so far. Oops. Can you imagine the compliance rate in the freedom-loving country of the United States? Anyway, well, last week, Texas Republican Dan Crenshaw drew fire for expressing support for red flag gun confiscation laws. But this week he gets some kudos for his exchange of tweets with the ever-annoying Alexandria idiot communist. It is also an excellent object lesson for anyone who thinks so-called universal background checks won't be a big deal, or for that matter, what leftists think of gun owners. It seems Crenshaw responded to a tweet about a Houston woman who used a firearm to defend herself against 5 attackers by saying, and I quote, "Situations like this story are why we protect the Second Amendment. Side note, with universal background checks, I wouldn't be able to let my friends borrow my handgun when they travel alone like this. We would make felons out of people just for defending themselves." End quote. So when dear AOC responded, she did something I love. Namely, I love it when liberals shed all pretense and say what they're really thinking. She responded, and I quote, "You're a member of Congress. Why are you lending guns to people unsupervised who can't pass a basic background check? The people you're giving a gun to have likely abused their spouse or have a violent criminal record, and you may not know it. Why on earth would you do that?" Now, the obvious insult is that if you're a gun owner, you are likely consorting with wife-beaters and felons. But believe it or not, that isn't the worst implication of the world envisioned by socialists. No, sir, the worst of it is this. You've heard everybody claim that nobody should have a gun without background checks. We need to keep guns out of the wrong hands. But as I have often said, in their world, the wrong hands are your hands. In AOC's world, even handing your firearm to a friend will require you to go to a gun dealer, pay them $50 for a transfer, and hope the NICS check goes through without confusing you with somebody else, as sometimes happens. If you are tempted to say, well, the congressional bill for universal background checks exempts transfers with relatives and a few other situations, understand that is only the interim version of what they want. Once you open the door to allowing the federal government to regulate private transfers, I can assure you that AOC's perfect world will soon follow. NASCAR fans, I regret to inform you that, to paraphrase the words of that Oldsmobile commercial, this ain't your father's NASCAR. This just in from the NRA, and I quote, "After decades of NASCAR drivers literally turning left for hours every race day," road course races excluded, of course, "the governing body appears to be taking a figurative left turn politically. KVAR, a retailer in outdoor and shooting sports products, reports that it was told it would need to edit or change an ad submitted earlier this year. It had intended to be included in NASCAR's official program. The problem, apparently, is that KVAR included depictions of, and I quote, assault-style rifles / sniper rifles. Presumably, the offending firearm is an AK variant manufactured by Arsenal. NASCAR's social media sales agent told KVAR, as well as other potential advertisers, that the racing organization is undergoing a, quote, gradual shift in its position on guns, which would appear to include NASCAR determining it is now opposed to the lawful manufacture, sale, and or possession of what it refers to as, quote, assault-style rifles / sniper rifles. Or at least the organization is opposed to advertising such items. This from an organization that started with moonshiners in the mountains. I can't imagine what they're thinking, whether they're thinking that the leftists are going to start going to NASCAR races. I don't know. My suggestion is to contact NASCAR to express your displeasure. I'm going to give you a phone number, so grab a pen. Their customer service number is open from 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, but they do take lunch between 1:30 and 2:30. Here is the number, 800-630-0535. Again, that is 800-630-0535. 800-630-0535. Well, it seems that the nutcase who killed 7 and injured at least 22 others in a West Texas shooting rampage on Labor Day weekend before he was shot and killed by police was indeed a nutcase. He was federally banned from owning or buying firearms after a court previously ruled he was, and this is not my words, this is the words of 18 U.S. Code, he was a mental defective and, surprise, surprise, apparently avoided undergoing a background check. Now, I know what you're thinking. and shame on you for using logic. You're probably saying, see, that's exactly what we said all along. Gun laws don't stop lawbreakers from getting guns. But that's not how you should be looking at it, at least according to the gun ban advocates. According to them, what you should be saying is, he got his gun in a private sale, so therefore we should be doing universal background checks. That's pretty much what Chuck Schumer says. Said the endlessly exploitive Senator Schumer, quote, if the House passed background checks bill would have been signed into law, this tragedy could have been avoided. But of course, selling a gun to a mental defective is already a crime. So translated, they are saying that people who failed to comply with existing law can be counted on to comply with a new gun law. Or putting it another way, these yahoos broke the law, so let's pass a new law they can break. But as always, Schumer and his ilk know their argument is ridiculous. More to the point, they know it will fail. In fact, they want it to fail. Why? Because when, not if, but when it fails, they will move to close what they will call the next loophole. This is what they will say. Well, it failed because we need national gun registration. You see, the goal of universal background checks is to create a national gun registry so that when they finally manage to ban semi-autos, or as in the case of Australians, even pump-action rifles and shotguns, or handguns, or whatever the ban du jour may be, they know where to find the guns. You're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. We're going to take a short break, after which we will return with more critical information enabling you to better defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. One of my GRNC leadership recently expressed dismay at the current trend toward gun control. She said, and I quote, "Folks, tell yourself whatever makes you feel better. Reality is we are losing the battles at a rapid rate. I don't have a solution, only fear and frustration." But is that true? Is the tide turning, as the cowardly anonymous letter to me claimed? If you are of a certain, somewhat advanced age, you might remember the late 1960s when a spate of political assassinations amid a period of civil turmoil produced the first major gun control bill passed by Congress, the Gun Control Act of 1968, which regulated interstate commerce in firearms, including banning mail orders and sales of guns. It created a system of federally licensed gun dealers. It created categories of prohibited persons who could not own guns, and much, much more. Of course, this debate was also notable for what it did not produce, namely the National Gun Registry that was sought by President Lyndon B. Johnson. The trend toward restricting firearms continued through the 1970s and 1980s, with legislation to ban Teflon-coated bullets, which were misnamed cop killer bullets after a false propaganda piece by NBC News made it an issue, and that passed in 1986. And the Undetectable Firearms Act, after the introduction of the Glock, which told us there would be undetectable guns passing through metal detectors at airports, which again was false, but that passed in 1988. And numerous organizations openly advocating an agenda to ban handguns entirely. Indeed, Handgun Control Incorporated formed in 1980 as an alliance between the National Coalition to Control Handguns and the National Coalition to Ban Handguns. But the trends were not entirely negative. Harlan Carter and Neil Knox turned the NRA into the legislative juggernaut it is today. They produced the Firearms Owners Protection Act of 1986, which corrected many of the problems of the Gun Control Act of 68. And so began the seesawing back and forth on gun control that we have witnessed ever since. You may also recall the dark days of the mid-1990s, when Democrats pushed the Brady Act in 1993, which initially created a 5-day waiting period for the purchase of firearms nationwide, but eventually sunsetted to an ostensibly instant background check via the computerized National Instant Background Check System. But if you want a feel for where compromise gets us, consider that it was the NRA which advocated NICS, the computerized background check system, as a compromise on the Brady Act. And ever since, gun ban advocates have been trying to close what they claim are loopholes in NICS, but which actually involve creating new classes of prohibited people barred from owning guns in the background check system. Then we had the so-called assault weapon ban in 1994, which ostensibly banned hundreds of firearms, not only by name, but by cosmetic features, such as pistol grips, flash suppressors, bayonet mounts. Got to stop those drive-by bayonettings, you see. And, of course, as a result, the gun voters got pissed off, and the result was the Republican revolution that swept the country, and Democrats promptly lost control of both chambers of Congress, preventing the Clintons from pursuing the hard left agenda they originally had planned. Maybe you recall the presidential election of 2000 when Al Gore couldn't even win his own state because of his support for gun control. And maybe you remember that political candidates took these lessons to heart, and those favoring gun control began to camouflage their positions. Suddenly, everybody believed in the Second Amendment, always with a but, of course. Gun bans? Absolutely not. We just want gun safety, they insisted. We just want common sense gun laws, they claimed. Hell, everybody up to and including, believe it or not, Chuck Schumer insisted they supported the Second Amendment. Do you remember Americans for Gun Safety? Maybe not. That particular monstrosity was the baby of billionaire founder of Monster.com, Andrew McKelvey, who figured out a way to make tax-deductible donations to a bunch of hardcore leftists at the Tides Foundation in San Francisco, who apparently found a way to launder that money to use it for gun control. But the biggest project of Americans for Gun Safety was that they purported a third way on gun control. They weren't anti-gun, they said. They just wanted common-sense gun laws. What they really did, however, was to teach left-wing political candidates to camouflage their position on gun control. Well, forget all that, because they're back. Democrats are once again out of the closet and in full-throated roar for gun bans. Democrat presidential candidates are uniformly calling for things up to and including mandatory gun buybacks, which they avoid saying is actually gun confiscation, sort of lipstick on the pig. Kamala Harris says that if Congress won't ban semi-automatic firearms, she will do it by executive fiat. Beto O'Rourke, quote, I want to be really clear that that's exactly what we're going to do. Americans who own AR-15s and AK-47s will have to sell them to the government. Americans who own these AR-15s and AK-47s will have to sell their assault weapons, all of them. Then we have supposedly centrist Democrat candidate Joe Biden, the man who once encouraged women to dispatch trespassers by discharging a shotgun out the back door. Now he says he wants to ban all, quote, magazines that can hold multiple bullets. That, of course, would include all magazines and, by association, all handguns. But we're not just talking about political candidates, mind you. Presidential candidates, mind you. According to Politico, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said pressuring Republicans to act on gun violence will be a top priority for Democrats this fall, according to a letter to his colleagues released Thursday. The point is that if you are demoralized by the current political environment, with the media and Democrats screaming for gun bans, Walmart and other retail chains banning open carry, but notably not all firearms carry, I urge you to think of the gun rights battle as a pendulum that swings back and forth depending on the political environment. So contrary to what gun ban advocates might want you to believe, the death of the Second Amendment, to paraphrase Samuel Clemens, reports of its death have been greatly exaggerated. That said, however, if the arm of the pendulum swings too far, the entire thing tips over. If you aren't busy defending your rights, contributing to pro-gun candidates, contributing to gun rights organizations, volunteering for said organizations, and most importantly, voting, if you don't do those things going into the 2020 elections, that pendulum might just swing too far. With that said, please allow me to add a shameless plug for our Political Action Committee, the GRNC Political Victory Fund. As a nonprofit organization, Grassroots North Carolina is limited by IRS regulations in spending money to elect or defeat candidates. Accordingly, and like most political nonprofits, we have created a federally registered political action committee to, in the words of my Italian ancestors, "Troda bums out." Unlike most other PACs, the fact that the GRNC Political Victory Fund is all volunteer means your money will be used more efficiently and effectively to defend your gun rights than by any other organization. Mailings, radio spots, automated phone alerts, social media ads, all of these cost thousands of dollars. But right now, you can not only donate to a worthy cause, which will elect candidates who defend your rights, but you can also win a really cool gun. The GRNC Political Victory Fund has a long history of what we call politically incorrect gun raffles. And here, allow me to interject that all transfers are conducted through federally licensed dealers and only to people who may legally own them in accordance with state and federal law. In the 2016 elections, for example, our Hillary Clinton special, in which we raffled off an AR-15, 1,000 rounds of ammo, and a framed portrait of Hillary Clinton, went viral. We were actually selling raffle tickets to people in countries that can't even own AR-15s. This time, we are selling off a highly attractive AR-556 pistol with all the bells and whistles. 10.5-inch barrel, M-LOK 4-end, the latest SBA 3 5-position stabilizing brace. With an MSRP of $949, this baby is sweet. We are also featuring additional prizes of a free AR-15 operator course from Blue Ridge Marksmanship in Burnsville, North Carolina. My wife and I have taken this course, by the way, and the owner and chief instructor at the school, Kevin Dylas, is second to none. I've been through 17 shooting schools, including Thunder Ranch, and Blue Ridge Marksmanship ranks with the best. Yet another prize is the Front Sight Constitutional Defendery Library of 10 DVDs. And so candidates... elect candidates who will defend your rights and win this attractive AR-15 pistol before Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer get a chance to ban it by going to grnc.org. That's grnc.org. grnc.org. Once again, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom. We're going to take a short break, after which we will return with still more information to better enable you to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Surrender your guns and turn yourself in immediately, because you might not know it, but you might be a domestic terrorist. As you may have heard, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors last week proclaimed the NRA, and by association all of its 5 million members, to be domestic terrorists. Said Fox News, and I quote, "The San Francisco Board of Supervisors has passed a resolution declaring the National Rifle Association a domestic terrorist organization and urged the federal government to do the same, the latest escalation in the heated rhetoric from Democrats regarding the NRA in the wake of several deadly mass shootings." The resolution, which passed Tuesday and says the U.S. is, quote, plagued by an epidemic of gun violence, accuses the NRA of, quote, using, quote, its considerable wealth and organizational strength to promote gun ownership and incite gun owners to acts of violence. All countries have violent and hateful people, but only in America do we give them ready access to assault weapons and large-capacity magazines, thanks in large part to the National Rifle Association's influence, the resolution says. The document resolves to assess the relationships that those who do business with the city have with the group, and says, quote, the city and county of San Francisco should take every reasonable step to limit those entities who do business with the city and county of San Francisco from doing business with this domestic terrorist organization. The resolution cites the July mass shooting at the Gilroy Garlic Festival, in which 3 people were killed. KTVU reports that the resolution's author wrote the text after that shooting. The NRA responded by calling the resolution a stunt that was distracting from the city's myriad of social problems. Quote, this ludicrous stunt by the Board of Supervisors is an effort to distract from the real problems facing San Francisco, such as rampant homelessness, drug abuse, and skyrocketing petty crime, to name a few, the statement said. According to KTVU, the NRA will continue working to protect the constitutional rights of all freedom-loving Americans. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Those wacky lefties in San Francisco are at it again. Aren't they just special? But as I often do, I would like you to set aside the natural inclination to just think of it as a few whack jobs doing what they do best. First, I want you to consider carefully the implications of an official government body making an official determination that a civil rights organization, because that's what the NRA is, a civil rights organization defending the Bill of Rights, an organization which has harmed no one, an organization which routinely condemns both violent crime and true acts of terrorism, an organization which conducts firearm safety and training programs, not only for citizens, but for the police and military. An organization which has done more for true gun safety, not what the left, which doesn't know which end of a gun spits out the bullet, tries to pass off as gun safety, has done more for true gun safety than any other organization in the world. An organization so mainstream that it works with the Boy Scouts to conduct safety programs. Yeah, I know the left is trying to eradicate the Boy Scouts too, and doing a pretty fair job of it at that. An organization so mainstream that it heralds a membership of roughly 5 million people. And yes, I have heard both gun owners and the media say that of the roughly 40% of American households that contain guns, only 5 million joined the NRA, but show me an instance where 5 million people have joined anything that involves a single activity. We are talking about a true civil rights organization, not Sinn Féin, not the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, which has been named among unindicted co-conspirators in a Texas terrorism case. Nope, we're talking about a civil rights organization that has done nothing except advocate for what the U.S. Supreme Court has determined to be a fundamental civil right. Next, I want you to consider that this San Francisco Board of Supervisors undoubtedly comprises people with political aspirations. Many undoubtedly want to be state legislators or, God forbid, congressmen. So the next thing I want you to consider these people in Congress along with, say, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, and Rashida Tlaib of Michigan. Now, consider what happens if George Soros and some of the other billionaire socialists get their way and win the presidency and the majority in both chambers of Congress, even for just one term, perhaps in 2020. Do you get a feel for where I'm going with this? But I'm not done yet. We have a third component to consider. According to the Washington Times, President Donald Trump has directed the FBI to give priority to domestic terrorism cases such as the El Paso shootings. Indeed, Vice President Mike Pence said Tuesday, vowing justice will be swift and certain in the El Paso, Texas shooting case. Pence said the orders from Mr. Trump to the FBI are to use, quote, all legal means available to disrupt hate crimes and prevent domestic terrorism before it occurs. Sounds laudable enough. Yes, for better or worse, these violent sociopaths who commit mass murder, even when not politically motivated, are starting to be considered domestic terrorists. In fact, even among Republicans, there is widespread support for enacting what they call domestic terror legislation. Here's what a piece from Headline News had to say. It was entitled, "Attacks by U.S. Extremists Lead to Push for Anti-Terror Laws." It goes on to say, quote, "A white man opens fire at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, targeting Mexicans and killing 22 people. Another man kills 11 Jewish worshippers at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. The two mass shootings and a presidential tweet put a spotlight on the idea of domestic terrorism, adding momentum to a debate about whether such attacks should be classified and tried in the same way as crimes against America by foreign extremist groups and their supporters. A Republican senator and a Democrat in the House of Representatives are drafting bills to do that, while some Republicans call for a left-wing group to be designated a terrorist organization." One of the legislators pushing for domestic terror legislation is Republican Senator Martha McSally of Arizona. Allow me to quote Politico. Quote, "Senator Martha McSally is seeking to make domestic terrorism a distinct federal crime, the latest sign that Republicans are increasingly serious about crafting a legislative response to recent mass shootings in Texas, Ohio, and California. The Arizona Republicans are aiming to close a loophole in the law that prevents federal authorities from specifically punishing domestic terrorism, according to a discussion draft circulated to other offices. McSally, an Air Force veteran, said in releasing the draft that, quote, "Domestic terrorism is in our backyard, and we need to call it and treat it under the law the same as other forms of terrorism. Authorities frequently charge domestic terrorism suspects with other offenses. Quote, "For too long we have allowed," this is McSally, "for too long we have allowed those who commit heinous acts of domestic terrorism to be charged with related crimes that don't portray the full scope of their hateful actions," she said. "That stops with my bill. The bill I am introducing will give federal law enforcement the tools they have asked for so that they can punish criminals to the fullest extent of the law." Now, I have no doubt that the Republicans pushing domestic terrorism legislation have the best of intentions. But then you know what they say about the road to hell. The bottom line is that you had better not take it lightly when a leftist calls a civil rights organization you support a domestic terrorist organization. It'll never happen, you say. Now, consider what my little San Francisco troll, Amy or Ami or whatever the hell she calls herself, was kind enough to include a link to a piece about San Francisco passing the resolution declaring NRA members to be domestic terrorists. That suggests to me that leftists everywhere support that resolution. They want NRA members to be considered domestic terrorists because, of course, the left will stop at absolutely nothing to control you. So the next time you are prone to laugh at the left for doing something like this, I want you to consider that sometime, somewhere in the future, the domestic terrorist subject to prosecution might be you. My name is Paul Vallone, and you've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop, at HyattGuns.com. I also encourage you to check out my website, GunsPoliticsAndFreedom.com. Spell out the "and," by the way. GunsPoliticsAndFreedom.com, where you can find both my writings and earlier editions of this show. See you next Sunday at 5.